Chapter 28. The next morning, an hour before dawn, July and Joe left the cabin and caught their horses. Joe was almost stunned with excitement at getting to go with July. His friend Roscoe Brown had been stunned too when July went by the jail and told Roscoe they were going. "You'll get that boy killed before I even teach him all my domino tricks," Roscoe said. It puzzled him that July would do such a thing. Joe was not tempted to question the miracle. The main thing that bothered him was that he lacked a saddle, but July took care of that by borrowing an old singletree from Peach Johnson. She was so pleased July was finally going after her husband's killer that she would have given them the saddle. Rats had eaten most of it anyway. Elmira got up and cooked them breakfast, but the food did nothing to ease the heaviness of heart which July felt. All night he had hoped she might turn to him, it being his last night at home for a while, but she hadn't. Once he had accidentally touched her, turning on the pallet they slept on, and she had stiffened. It was clear to July she wasn't going to miss him, though he was certainly going to miss her. It was peculiar, but she showed no sign of being sorry to see Joe go either. Yet Joe was her son, and he was her husband. If she didn't love her husband and her son, who did she love? For all she knew, they would be gone for months, and yet she was just as brisk with them as if it was an ordinary day. She saw to it that Joe drew another bucket of water before he left, and then jumped on July for nearly forgetting his jaundice medicine. Yet for all her bad temper, it was no relief to leave. He felt apprehension so strongly that at one point it seemed to tighten his throat and nearly caused him to choke on a bite of cornbread. He felt he was being carried along through life as a river might carry a chip. There seemed to be no way he could stop anything that was happening, although it all felt wrong. The only relief he could find was in the knowledge that he was doing his job and earning the $30 a month the town paid him. There were a few tight-fisted citizens who didn't think there was $30 worth of sheriffing to do in Fort Smith in a given month. Going after a man who had killed the mayor was the kind of work people seemed to think a sheriff ought to do, although it would probably be less dangerous than having to stop two rivermen from carving up one another with knives. They left Elmira standing in the door of the cabin and rode through the dark town to the jail. But before they got there, Red, Joe's horse, suddenly bowed up, began to buck and threw him. Joe was not hurt, but he was dreadfully embarrassed to be thrown right at the outset of such an important trip. "It's just Red," July said. "He's got to have his buck. He's gotten rid of me a time or two that way." Roscoe slept on a couch in the jail and was up and stumbling around in his bare feet when they got there. July got a rifle and 2 boxes of bullets, and then got down a shotgun too. "That's my shotgun," Roscoe said. He was not in the best of tempers. He hated to have his sleeping quarters invaded before it was even light. "We'll need to eat," July said. "Joe can shoot a rabbit now, and then if we don't see no deer, you'll probably see a Comanche Indian, and they'll cook both of you as if you was dawn rabbits," Roscoe said. "Oh, they're about whipped, I reckon," July said. "'Bout," Roscoe said. "Well, I 'bout knocked out a wasp's nest last year, but the 2 I missed near stung me to death. 'Bout ain't good enough where Comanches are concerned. You must be planning to make San Antonio in one day since you're starting this early," he said, still grumpy from having been routed out of bed. July let him grumble and took a saddle scabbard off one of the other rifles so there'd be something to put the shotgun in. By the time light had begun to show over the river, they were ready to go. Roscoe was awake enough by then to feel apprehensive. Being deputy was an easy job while July was around, but the minute he left, it became heavy with responsibility. Anything could happen, and he would be the one who would have to handle it. "Well, I hope the darn Comanches don't decide they want Fort Smith," he said morosely. Several times he had dreams of a troop of wild Indians riding down the street and filling him full of arrows while he sat in front of the jail, whittling. "They won't," July said, anxious to get away before Roscoe thought up other bad things that might happen. Roscoe noted that Joe was bareheaded Another sign of July's recklessness. It occurred to him that he had an old black felt hat. It was hanging on a peg, and he went back in and got it for the boy. "Here, you take this," he said, surprised at his own generosity. When Joe put it on, his head disappeared nearly down to his mouth, which was grinning. "If he wears that, he'll probably ride off a cliff," July said, although it was true the boy needed a hat. "You can tie it on with some string," Roscoe said. "It'll keep that darn sun out his eyes." Now that they were ready, July felt strangely unwilling to leave. It was getting good light. Far down the street they could see the river shining, and beyond it a faint glow of red on the horizon. In its awakening hour, the town seemed peaceful, lovely, calm. A rooster began to crow. Yet July had a sense that something was terribly wrong. More than once it occurred to him that Elmira might have some strange disease that caused her to act the way she was acting. She had less appetite than most people, for one thing. She just nibbled at her food. Now he had no one to trust her to, except Roscoe Brown, who was only slightly less afraid of her than he would be of a Comanche. "You look after Ellie," he said sternly. "If she needs her groceries carried, you carry 'em." "Okay, July," Roscoe said. July got on his horse, adjusted his bedroll, and sat looking at the river. They weren't carrying much bedding, but then the warm weather was coming. "Take a fish now and then if you catch one," he said. To Roscoe Brown it seemed a strange instruction. Elmira had made it plain that she didn't like fish. "Okay, July," he said again, though he didn't mean to waste his time offering fish to a woman who didn't like them. July could think of no more instructions. Roscoe knew the town as well as he did. "Joe, be careful," Roscoe said. For some reason it affected him to see the boy going. It was a poor saddle he had, too, but the boy still grinned out from under the old hat. "We'll catch him," Joe said proudly. "Well, I'll try not to let anybody shoot no more dentists," Roscoe said. July regarded the remark as irrelevant, for Roscoe knew well enough that the town had been without a dentist since Benny's death. "Just watch old man Darlin," he said. "We don't want him to fall off the ferry." The old man lived in a shack on the north bank and merely came over for liquor. Once in a while he eluded Roscoe, and twice already he had fallen into the river. The ferryman didn't like him anyway, and if it happened again they might well let him drown. "I'll handle the old scamp," Roscoe said confidently. Old man Darlin was one responsibility he felt he could handle any day. "Well, I guess we'll see you when we see you, Roscoe," July said. Then he turned his horse away from the river and the glowing sky, and he and little Joe were soon out of town.